So today we are looking at JavaScript objects, all right? And I have a brief definition which I grabbed from the MDN network, and it says the object type represents one of JavaScript's data types, and it is used to store various keyed collections and more complex entities. And you're going to see about those in a moment. It says objects can be created using the object constructor or the object initializer, right? So we can use the object initializer or the object constructor. That's one way by which we can create an object, and we'll look at that. Then also we can also use the literal syntax. So the first way, which we'll just take a brief look at, is the object constructor. All right. So we could say we can create a new instance of what object, which is what we have in JavaScript like this, and then maybe we have this. So what we can do is assign this to a variable. So we could say let obj equals new object. All right. Then when we come back and we can log our obj to the console, and then we have the object showing over there for us. So when you want to know that data type that results from that, then we can say that type of obj, and it shows that it's an object for us. So that is what we have. Then after we have now initialized an object used this way, what we can continue to do is now go ahead to add the the properties and then their corresponding values. So we could come back and say that obj oh, come on now, obj dot name. Then we could say Daniel. All right. So then we could also say obj dot age equals 30. Then we could also say obj dot height is 1.5 meters maybe. Then we could continue and say that obj dot favorites equals, then we can have an array. Then we could have a rice. Then we could have blue. So favorite food, favorite color. Then football, which is the favorite sport. So we have this. Then when we log obj to the console now, we can see that we have all the values assigned. So we have the age, which is 30. We have name, which is Daniel, height, which is 1.5, and then the favorite, which is an array, and it contains rice, blue, the favorite food, which is rice, blue, which is color, and then football, which is Dan's favorite sport. So that is a basic way, one way by which we can get objects. However, I would be going with the other option by using the literal syntax, and we could say let obj. So I've commented out the previous code. We can't see anything in our console for now, and we can say that let obj. Then we bring our curly braces, and now we could say that name is Daniel. Then we could continue and say that age, right, because sorry, it's supposed to be an integer 32. Then we could have what else? Height. Sorry, height. It's 1.5. Then we could have, sorry, because it's supposed to be a colon, because it's a key. And then we bring a colon, then we bring a value. Then we could have favorites. Then we can put that in an array or an object. So now for the second example, let me use an object. So we could have color. Then we would say that red. Then we could have food. Then we could say rice. Then we could have sports. Then we could say football. All right. And we now have our new object defined for us. So if we go ahead and then log obj object to the console, we can now see all the values over there. And that is the other way by which you can also um, declare an object or initialize an object. So we'll move on and then we'll look at the next thing. So the next thing I would like to talk about is the data types. Now, just like we have arrays, and arrays can take up all data types. They can take up a string, they can take up a boolean, they can take up a null data type, they can take up undefined data type, they can take up an array inside, so we can have a nested array. We can also have an object inside an array. The same way, an object also takes up all the data types and even more. So an object can take a string, just like we have over here. It can take an integer, and it can also take a float. In JavaScript, it's also referred as a number. Then it also can contain an object, so a nested object in this scenario. And then also it can contain an array, just like we had in our first example where we assigned an array to the favorites over here. Let me just uncomment that. So we have that. Now I'm commenting it back again because we are not working with that. And so that is it. And also, um, we could say that another thing which we can do is include a function inside an object. So we could say full profile, all right, full profile, and then we can assign that to a function. So we're gonna work on an anonymous function over here. We can create a function, and then we are going to do whatever that we want to do inside the function. So I'm going to just bring a basic example, and then I'll just say return. I'm gonna do this and say that this the name, and the this over here will go back to refer to the object. So instead of saying that obj.name, which is going to work fine, what we can do is use the this keyword, and it's going to work fine because this now refers to the object on which we are performing the action. So we want to say return this name. So what we want to do is say Daniel is what Daniel is this.age years old and likes, then I could say uh, have this, then we can talk about this dot favorites dot spot. All right, so we could have that, and then when we come back and we decide to, what we can actually do is call this function. All right, and in JavaScript, when you have a function which is a function inside an object, it is called a method. So what I can come back is come to my obj and say that what obj.full profile. All right, and because it is a function, you have to bring out parentheses, or in this case it is a method, so we have to bring out parentheses. And then when I log it, you realize that this function runs and returns Daniel is 32 years old and likes football. So that is one thing that we need to take note about JavaScript objects. Uh, we'll continue to look at the next thing. And when we want to get the values of an object, then what we have to do, like we just looked at a little earlier on, we have to use the dot notation, or we can also use the bracket notation. So I could come and log uh, obj dot name, and then I'm going to get the name Daniel. I'm going to log obj dot age, then I'll get the age. So when I want to access a particular value, I have to bring the name of the object and then bring the dot notation and then specify the key that to the value that I want. So when I want to get the name, I use the key name over there. When I want to get height, I use the key height. Another thing which we can do is use the bracket notation. And just like we use arrays, in arrays we use the bracket notation with the index. Objects are similar but a little bit different. So we're using the bracket notation. Remember, um, when we are accessing the value or the property in an object, we don't use the curly braces. That's for creating the object. And so we are using the square braces, and then we can use now the square braces is going to take a string, and then the string is going to be the key to the property we want to access. So when we want to access age, instead of bringing .age, we can do it this way, and it's still going to give us the same result. When we want to access favorites, we can do it this way, and it's still going to log the favorites. Remember, the favorite is also another nested object, so that is showing over there. And then when we have items nested in each other, what we can actually do is you can also go back here, and maybe you want to know his favorite food. You can just say favorite dot food, and then you're gonna have his favorite food, which is rice. All right, you can also continue with the bracket notation and say food, and it's also going to work that way for you. So you can have those combinations and how you want them to be able to access the properties in an object, or even with the nested properties. Remember, if you should have an array, then when you get to that array and you want to access the property inside the array, you would have to use the bracket notation with an integer, and that integer is going to be the index of the property you want to um, get, right? So if I should come here and say that favorite spot, maybe he has more than one favorite spot, so I put that in an array, and then I could say football, and then maybe he likes basketball, then say he likes hockey. I wanted to put rugby, but I wasn't sure of the spelling, so let me just make that as that. And we have, right, so maybe when I want to know his favorite sports, it's an array of three sports. So when I want to know his first favorite sports, I could come back here and say 0, and that is going to tell me that his first favorite sport is football. And I want to know his last favorite sports, I could just say we have three items over there, so that's going to be second, uh, index 2, and then we have that's the third favorite spot, and we are not working on arrays, so let me just leave that as that, and then we move on to the next thing. All right, then another thing which we can do with an object is to create an array from the object and have uh, we can create an array from the keys in an object, all right, or we can create an array from the values in an object, all right. So what we can do is, let me just comment out everything, and then back here I'm going to uh, assign a new object, and I'm going to say that let user equals then I'm going to create a new object, and I'm going to say that or let me just say let max, then I'm going to say that science, then we have 32, then I want to say that math, we have 45, then I want to say geography, then we have 78, then I want to say history, then we could have 45 as well. All right, so we have this object over here, we have the keys, right? So what we want to do is actually uh, create an array from the keys, right? So what we can do is come here and say that object dot keys, then we are going to, so we use this method, right, the object dot keys method, and what we're going to do is we're going to pass a parameter, an argument, sorry, and then the argument is going to be the object which we want to work on. So in this case we want to have what, max, and then what we're going to do is we'll just assign this to a variable or just log this to the console, right? So I could say let uh, so what I'm going to do is change these to results, right? So I could have better keywords to work with. Then I'm going to do this results, so that when I come back I can create a variable and call the variable max and assign it to the max over there. And then when I choose to log this max to the console, then I can see an array where the keys over here are now showing as elements in an array for me. Then the same way we can now say let subjects equals object dot values, all right, then we want to get results, and it's going to extract all the results in this particular object, and then put them as an array. So I can go ahead and then log my subjects to the console, and that is going to, what am I getting wrong? Yeah, so that's going to log the subjects. Okay, so I had a little bit error in my what I was assigning the values to the wrong variable. So over here, I'm working on let max equals so this should be subjects equals right. Then I could come back here and uh, put subjects over here, then come back and say max, and it's going to be the value, so I can log max over here, right? So I'm assigning the subject to the keys because the keys are the subjects over here. Then we have them. Then now we also have our values in another array, and then we have them over there. And so that is one thing that can be done, one action that can be performed on a JavaScript object. Then we'll move on and we'll look at another thing where we can convert an object to a string. So before that, let me put titles on whatever we are learning, so we could do this and say declaring an object using the object constructor. Then that is it over there. Then declaring an object using the, what did you say, literal syntax, right? So literal syntax. Then we have that over there as well. Then I would call this I would say accessing properties in an object. Then I would come back here and say that uh, creating an array from the keys and values of an object. All right, so that whatever, because I'm commenting out the codes, you can know what we are working with each of them. All right, so let me uncomment this object for now. Then I would come back here and say the next thing we're going to work on is converting an object to a string, right? And then what we're going to do is we're going to use the JSON, all right, the JSON.stringify method, and then we are going to perform that action on our object. So I could now bring my results over here, all right? Then if I decide to console log this, if I can log this, you realize that now everything has been converted to a string. Remember, when let me log results above here, so you can see the difference. So this shows as an object, but this has been converted to a string. And one reason you would want to convert your object to a string is when you have data saved inside your object and you'd want to save it. And for example, you want to save it on using the local storage. The local storage takes only strings, and so you'd want to use this to do it, to be able to save it, and then you can retrieve it back later. Then that is how to, let me uncomment this. So this is how to convert an object to a string. So what you can actually do is now say that you can assign this to a variable. So you can say string object, right? String object equals just saying that stringify, then we stringify the result, so that we can now log, so we can now load our string object, and then we have that in the console. Then what we can also do is now convert a string, what a string to an object. So we can do that and say we want to let new obj, right? And then we are going to use the JSON.pass method and pass in our string object. So the string object is what we have over here. That's now a string, our object that has been turned into a string, all right? And so we can do that, and then when we come back, we can now log our new object to the console, and now we have that back as our object for us. And so that is it. And then we'll move on. And then one thing that happens when you're trying to convert a string to an object is that, sorry, an object to a string, is that if the object contains a method, or let's say a function within it. Remember, I said that when an object contains a function, that function is called a method. And so when, let me uncomment this particular object, all right, then I can come back here and then say that I want to log, I want to stringify my obj over here. Remember, the obj has um, a method in it, so I could say that let another string across json dot stringify. Then I'm gonna bring my obj. All right, now let me log another string, and you realize that after the favorites we had a method over here, but in the stringified version of this particular object the method is not showing, and that is because functions or methods cannot be converted to strings directly. And so what we can actually do is, if we want to have this particular method also part of our stringified object, that is, if your object contains a method, you have to first of all convert your string, sorry, convert your method to a string separately, and that is also done using another with a different method. And then you do that, we reassign to it, then you can now go back and then convert. That becomes a string, and so you can continue and then convert your whole object. So let's do that in a moment. So sorry, I could say converting an object with with a string to, sorry, with a with a method, to a string, right? So first of all, what we are going to do is we know that. So let me remove this. Then what we can come and say is, what we have is we have our full profile over here, and then we can come back and say that um, let string function, right? So our function that we have stringified it is going to be object dot full profile, all right? Then we are going to use the toString function, right? We're going to call it toString method on it. And then when we log this now, when we log string function, we're going to have our function converted to string for us. Remember, in the console, string is displayed as white text over here for us. So we have that. Great. So now what we can actually do is, now when we are going to log, when we are going to stringify our object, this doesn't go to modify when we use this particular method object.full profile. Now we are trying to locate that, and then the value that is over there, which is this particular method over here, will now be converted to string. It doesn't modify the original object. What that actually does is it creates a new instance. So it creates a copy of that particular value and then turns it to a string. And so that is why we would have to assign that to a new variable to be able to look at it. So if after doing that and then we log our original object, you realize that it's still showing us a function over there for us. And so let me go back, let me undo. Okay, so we have our string function. So what we are going to do is now come back, and then we have to do what? A reassignment. So now we have stringified, or we have converted our function to string. Then we could say that obj dot full profile equals obj dot full profile to string. And what we are doing over here is we are converting, we are reassigning this value, and that is one thing which you can do in a string, right? So let's say we have named Daniel. What I can do is, let me just do that. I could say obj.name to what, change it to Jones, so that I can now log obj, and you realize that the name is now Jones. So we can change the values for each property by just doing the simple reassignment. So what we are doing here basically is that we are trying to reassign a new value to um, the function over here, which is the full profile property. And then the new value we are assigning to it is that we are picking the same thing and then we are converting it to a string. And so now we can now come back and log our object, all right? Then after logging our object, you realize that what we have over here is now what? It's now a string, all right? So you realize that inside the object, the string comes in quotation marks, and it also comes in blue text. That's if it's inside an object. If it's not, if it's directly in the console, the string comes as white. So kindly take note of that so that we can get to understand the difference. So here you realize that this comes here and it's shown as string. So I could just say type of object dot full profile, and it's going to show string. So this now is now logged directly to the console for us. So we have it here, and we can test that using the type of keyword, and it is showing us what, a string. So now we know that our full profile property in the object is now a string. Then we can go ahead and then convert the whole object to a string now. So we could say obj dot string sorry, json dot stringify. Then we can now pass in our obj variable, which is the object, and then we have that. So we can now assign this to a variable. Then we could say let new so right. So now I could say let string obj, which I think I have assigned this variable earlier, but I've commented it. So that is why I'm trying to use the titles to separate them. When I give this code back to you guys, and you want to go through to maybe make notes, you try to comment them one by one, then you can try to reassign. So let me just say another obj, so we don't have to experience problems if we decide to uncomment everything at once. All right. So when we come back here, then we say we want to log another obj to the console, realize that our function and everything is now showing for us over there as a string, because remember we have converted everything to a string, right? So now we have our object as a string, and then we know that we can use this pass property to convert it from a string back to an object. All right, now we know that we have added an extra step to be able to get our method to now show us a string for us, right? So let's see if we can easily reverse that, right? So let me comment this, and then I could also say that converting an object, a stringified object with a string, sorry, with a method back to an object. Remember the object down, we have stringified, we have converted the function to string. So when we bring it back, we have to add an extra step to be able to have our function back as a function for us. So what we're going to do is say that we want to have JSON. So where did we convert this? We converted this, the function, to a string, and then we converted everything to a string. Then we are logging our string to the console. So we can now come back and say that new obj, I use a new obj. So we can now say that uh, our new obj, right, which we are now picking from the console, sorry, from our another object, all right, which that is the stringified version of our object after we have converted our method to a string. Remember that. Now we can say that JSON dot pass. All right, then we are going to pass our stringified object is another obj. And then let's now log um, let's now log our new obj to the console, and everything works right for us. But we realize that our function is also not showing as a function, but it's also showing as what? As a string. When I say full profile, we realize that that is being logged as a function for us. Let me uh, comment it so we can just have one data to work with as we move along. So we have that showing over here, which is a string for us. Then we can also move on and then look at how we can now convert our string, sorry, our method back into a function for it to work for us. So now we have this, and then what we can say is that we know we can access the particular function by using our new obj dot full profile. So what we can actually do is use the eval. We can use the eval function. All right, so what we are going to do is the same way we reassigned our obj the full profile to the stringified version of itself. We're just going to try and do the same thing. So we're going to say that obj dot full profile, sorry, remember it's our new obj dot full profile. All right, it's now going to be um, our new obj the full profile. But in this instance, what we are going to do is what we are going to use the eval. All right, then what we are going to do is we're going to pass in whatever we want to convert to the function, and this is not going to give us the best result. Let me log that, and we have an error because this syntax is a bit not right. So what we are going to do is we do a little bit of a concatenation, and I can come here and bring in my codes to add a string, and I have a opening braces. Then I will bring my class for the concatenation. Then now I can have the closing braces as well. Remember, let me not forget to concatenate this as well. Then when we work on it, we realize that now we have what? We have a function. We're about to see how it works for us. So when I come back and I log our new object to the console, we realize that our full profile is now shown as a function and no more as a string. Now, a better way to go about this, I love going with the template strings, and it's a little bit better for me. So I can now have my my braces or brackets, as you would call it. Then I have my dollar, and I do this, so I could say that our new obj dot full profile, and it's still gonna give us the same result. So we still have function running for us over there. And that is how you convert an object with a method to a string and then back from a string. So I'm going to comment all this out again. And then we'll move on to look at another thing, which is a few properties. All right. So one thing we can do is also delete an item in an object. All right, and we can do that by using the delete keyword. So let's say we have here, and I want to delete geography. All right, or let's say I want to delete science because we didn't perform too well in science. So we could use the delete keyword, and then we would say results dot science. All right. Now I can go ahead and then log. Sorry, can go ahead and then log results to the console, and you'd realize that science is no more in there. And then unlike arrays where the delete keyword takes out the value but leaves that space blank, remember that objects are with key value pairs. All right, so now everything is now gone. We targeted a key, and it's gone with the value assigned to the particular key. So we have everything working right for us. There's nothing to shift. Everything is just there as it is. So we have this, and that's how to delete a property from an object. Then we would also look at the next thing. So let me comment this out again, and then that's going to be to check if a particular key or a particular property exists in an object. All right. So remember, I've commented this out. So we have our result object showing forest, the same over there. So I could now come back and say that band, I could say console.log, right? And I would say results dot has own property. Then I'm going to pass the property, all right? Then I could say science, and this is going to log true because result has a property called science, and it's going to work. It's going to log true for us. Then we could try and say history, and I think that works for us, right? But when we go ahead and say uh, biology, it reads false because we don't have any key as biology in this particular list. So that is how the has own property method works on the result. So what you can actually do is assign this to a value, and maybe you would work with it. So let me say check if an object has a particular property, and we could go with it that way. Then another thing which we can do to an object is we can use the dot entry property, right? And then that is what that could do. Let's see an example and say that we have this over there. Then we can come back and then create a variable, right? And say that let some array. Then we assign that to, we can call the object keyword, then we could say entries, right? Then we're going to pass our results object in here. And then when we log this, log some array to the console, it's going to create an array. And what happens is it creates an array for each of these key value pairs inside the main array. So what we are doing, what we are having over here is we have one array, a whole array, and in each of this array, it has what, one element for each set of this key value pairs. So the very first is what the assigns, and we have that second array inside the main array, which has two items on it. Then we have another array which also has two items for max and the max assigned to max, and that happens. So these will say, let me do this. We can say creates, or let's say it retains this retains an array of each key. I think yeah, each key value pair as an array, right? I think that should make sense. Then that is how that works. Then we can now let me comment that, and then we move to look at the next thing. So another thing which we can talk about is inheritance for objects. So I could now come back. Let me comment my previous array, sorry, my previous object, this, and let me comment these as well. And then we could come back and say that let school, um, then we could assign this to a new object. Then we could say that name. All right, so we could let me not add the name, so let me just say curriculum. Then assign that to let's say the GES. Then we could say that duration is 3 years. Sorry, let me put that in a string. 3 years. Then we could, right, so I could say main language, and that is going to be English. So that is what happens in this particular school. All right. Then I could come back here and then create another variable, and then I would call that let Octa, right? So this is also another school, and then I'm going to say object dot create, then I'm going to pass what school over here, all right? Then when I log Okta to the console, I'm going to get an empty object, all right? But what actually happens is that Okta has inherited all the properties of school over here, all right? So I could come back and say that I could also define new properties for Okta. So I could say Okta.name equals Okta skills center. And then now when I'm logging Okta to the console, it's showing over there, but it still has all those properties that it has inherited from school, and you can see them by accessing those properties. So I could come back and say that curriculum, and then the genius curriculum, which Okta follows growth. Because what this does is it's like it creates a blueprint, and we have this. So if any school that comes into existence will have to follow this structure by let's say the government, what the government has laid out, then they would have to come. There are some properties which are to be unique to the school, like their name, their location, and stuff. All right, so we can come back here and say Okta dot location and assign that to Accra, I'd say. All right, so that when we decide to log after to the console, we have the name and Accra. So the inherited properties will only be accessible directly, not by logging the whole object to the console. Then another thing which we can also do is reassign this value. So we could say that maybe in Octa we want to change our duration from 3 years. So we could say Octa the duration is just like we can reassign a value. We could say maybe 2 years. All right. Then when we are logging Octa, we have our duration showing 2 years. Remember, what we've done here is to reassign the value, and this doesn't go back to change the blueprint. It doesn't go back to change the school. So when we decide to log school back to the console, the duration is showing us what 3 years over there and not what has been modified over here. So this is basically how the concept of inheritance works. And then if we decide to create another object, right, to inherit properties from Octa, so we could come here and say let's say web class equals object dot create, and then we could pass Octa, right? Then we could now come back and log web class dot name, right? And we are going to what do I have in here? Console. So we can now come back and log our web class dot name, and it's going to be the same over here. And if it's a property that hasn't been reassigned, like let's say the main language, then it's going to go back up to this because this has already fetched that value from here, and so this goes back to get from it. So basically, that is how the concept of inheritance works in on an object in JavaScript. Then we'll move on to look at yet another thing, which is called destructuring. All right. So let me go back and uncomment my results object because I want us to work with that. Then I'll come back here, and then maybe I could say I can decide to create a variable and say let's say science score the now I want to get the value of whatever is over here, right? So I can now say that results dot science, all right? Then when I decide to log science score to the console, I'm going to get the 32, that is the value um, over there. Now with this structuring, what we can actually do is come back here. So we could say then I'm going to bring my bracket rotation. So let me comment this out. And then what I can go ahead to do is say that let over here, then I would say science score, all right, equal to with this structuring, I'll bring my colon. All right, then I'm going to say that science, sorry, science. I think I'm reversing it, so it should be science, and that is going to be assigned to my new variable, so science score. That is what I want to do. Then I'll come back here and say that equal to the name of the object. Remember, the name of the object over here is results, so that is what I'm working with, right? And then we are still logging this to the console, and when I save, you realize that we are getting the same result. So if I want to change this to history score, I could just make this history. Then when I log history score to the console, I have 45, and that is what we have over here, right? Now we can now also write this in a better way and say that we want to assign maybe the same variable to the same keyword, right? So we could say let, and instead of assigning a new variable called history score, maybe we want to call that history as well. So we could say history, then the new variable we want to get is, we are also going to call that history. Then we could say equal to results. Let's, I have an error over here. Okay, I'm logging history score. So I'm supposed to log history because we've changed the variable. So I'm now logging history over here. Now this history is this variable. This is a variable which we have created. And so now that is logged to the console. And then even with this, there is still a better way to still go about with this, because one thing about destructuring is if you have the key to a variable, and then which has been assigned to a name, sorry, the key to a value in an object, and that is being assigned to a variable. If the name of the variable and the name of the key are the same, what you can actually do, let me just duplicate this instead of having to write everything again. You can just write the value directly or the variable directly, the history to get results. And now that we have now saved history, we are now still getting 45 in our console, because remember the key over here is what, history. So I could just come back here and change this to science. All right. Then when I log science to the console, I'm going to get my 32 over there. So that is basically the concept of destructuring. And I think that goes that way. Another thing which we can do as well with destructuring is the reverse. Now we are trying to access. Next thing we can do is assign, right? So we could say let username equals Jamie, right? Jamie Forsen. And apologies if that happens to be somebody's name, Jamie Forsen, all right? Now we could say that we want to create an object, all right? So let user detail, then we could have here, then we would say that country, all right? Then we would say Ghana. Then we would want to say that email is Jamie Forsen at gmail.com. Once again, apologies if this is somebody's email. So now I want to have his username. So I could say username equals. Now we already have a variable which has this as username. So I could just assign this to this variable and say that username. All right. Then I can come back and then, sorry, this is not supposed to be. It's supposed to be open. Why am I making these mistakes? Right, great. So I can now come back and log these user details, all right, to the console, and then we have username to be Forsen, which has been fetched from the variable over here for me. Now a better thing which we can actually do is because we have this, the key we are assigning here is the same as the variable, we could just write everything straightforward. And then after we log to the console, we still have the same thing working for us. Basically, that's the concept of the structuring. All right. And then look, going back up just here with whatever we have done to the science score. Let me see if right. So we still have that working over there. What we can do is continue and then assign more variables. I get it. So from each stage, we could say that. Let me comment this out. Let me comment this out. So we could come back here and say science and say science score. All right. uh, let me comment this right. So we have science and science score. So we can also log um, history over here. You can log history. Let me change this back to history score. That way we wanted to do it that way around earlier. Right. So history to history score, science to science score. So we can now log history score. Then we also log science score, and it's gonna have those two parts. So you can now we are trying to now we are assigning two variables, right, with just one line, and then you can add a comma, and then you could say maths. Do we have mass and we have okay, yeah, we have mass, so we could just say that mass to mass score. Then we can now log mass score to the console again, and then the mass has 45. It's supposed to be science score. All right, so we have history score, science score, and then math score, and then those ones also get logged to uh, the console for us. So for now, that is all that we'll be working on with objects. We'll begin to create projects, and then we'll have to bring all of this that we are learning to use. Thank you guys for hanging around, and then we'll continue with another lecture another time.